and I'm a research intern at of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. It is a matter of great pleasure to extend a warm and humble welcome to all to another edition of ICS Wednesday seminar titled From the Two Sessions to the Third Plenum, Understanding the Chinese Party State Priorities, Challenges, and Future Directions. The two sessions held in March 2024 were pivotal moments in China's economic recovery following the COVID-19 pandemic. Policymakers faced significant challenges due to ongoing economic issues, further escalating tensions in the field of economy with the US and European allies. All these factors led to the postponement of Third Plenum of 20th Party Congress to July 2024. The government of China took various measures to address these issues leading up to the Third Plenum. This panel discussion aims to explore the priorities, obstacles, and future policy trajectories for the party state. For today's panel discussion, we have with us Dr. Bhim Soba, Dr. Devendra Kumar, and Dr. Arvind Yelleri. Dr. Soba is an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science, School of Social Sciences, University of Hyderabad, and an adjunct fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. His research interests are China studies, domestic politics, party organization, and comparative politics. Dr. Kumar is an associate fellow at the Center of Excellence for Himalayan Studies, Shiv Nadar Institution of Eminence, Delhi. His research focuses on cadre management in ethnic minority regions, socio-economic programs in border countries, and the political legitimacy of the Communist Party of China. Dr. Yelleri is an associate professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, visiting faculty at the Fudan School of Management, Shanghai, and an honorary fellow at the ICS. He has co-edited Tailspin, The Politics of India-China Economic Relations, and authored China Inc., Between State Capitalism and the Economic Statecraft. The chair for today's panel discussion is Dr. Anand P. Krishnan. Dr. Krishnan is a fellow at the Center of Excellence for Himalayan Studies, Shiv Nadar Institution of Eminence, Delhi, and an adjunct fellow at the ICS. His research interests are labor relations in China and India, supply chain in Global South, and state-society relations. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to ask all the participants to follow few housekeeping rules. All the participants shall be muted during the seminar. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliations. Alternatively, you may also use raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. Thank you. And over to you, Dr. Krishnan.
Thank you, Anushka, and a warm good afternoon to all of you. It's really happy to be back at another seminar of the Institute of Chinese Studies and to moderate what promises to be a wonderful afternoon of discussions on something which is actually, if you look at it, as something of a regular exercise we do at the institute. Especially when the two sessions happen, we immediately, or at least within a very few weeks, we have this exercise. Mostly either some of us within the institute or even some having people externally. But due to various things, this kept delayed. We had to find a suitable date. And also things in China were also in a bit of flux. So we also thought of having a grip of things and finding a suitable time to consolidate all that was coming then and then finding an appropriate time for this. Then by what I mean, if it is virtue that suddenly out of the blue comes the announcement that the third plenum, which has been delayed for more than a year now, is now slated for July. So as Anushka in her introduction was talking mostly about the third plenum, but this was a timely exercise in the run-up to the third plenum, but we will take lessons or at least the learnings from whatever happened in March at the Lianghui or the two sessions, and then we kind of build up towards what is what could be anticipated, what is expected at the plenary or a very important plenary session. So just to set the ball rolling, I won't take a lot of time because we have three people who are well versed with the various things which they are going to talk about. So just to set the tone, it has been 2 years since China has now come out of its zero COVID policy, and even as the policy was being implemented over the last or more than for close to 3 years, the economic challenges of the country was really a talking point. Though a lot of things post that or even during the pandemic did occupy a lot of space, but a lot of these challenges have also had their origins even before the pandemic set in. In fact, some of the things, as with many things with the pandemic, really got exacerbated for over the course of COVID-19. There are a lot of structural issues with regard to what China's economic challenge or downturn is being faced. There is, and in fact, some of this is very well mentioned in the work report by Li Jiang, which was presented in March. There is a drop in both external and internal demand. There are serious issues with the real estate, which has been identified by the party state as a serious issue, acknowledged. Overcapacity has been talked about. In fact, there is a lot of commentary over the last few months on overcapacity itself, especially in the light of the US-China tensions as well, especially in the high-end sectors and high technology sectors. The other serious issue which needs to be looked at is the case of unemployment, or youth unemployment to be more precisely. And may I use also this opportunity to join that twine with also India, because this is a serious issue even within India, and especially we are now in the final phase of the general elections, and it's just a week or more for the results to be announced. And this was sometimes very greatly played as a central issue that is being debated even in the Indian scenario. So I mean, to return to the Chinese case, they even dropped out or completely shunned or jettisoned even the statistics last August on unemployment, quote unquote, for corrective purposes, or to make them say that their max was not doing properly. So that is another kind of an issue. Of course, so both domestically there are these serious economic challenges, and coupled with the international situation, whether it is the Ukraine crisis or whether it is the war in Gaza, those have also had repercussions. And of course, the US tensions with the United States is another serious challenge. So all that is driving, and combined with, of course, this economic part is also the politics of it. And we have also seen over the last at least a last year or so, there has been also churning within the party in terms of the anti-corruption campaign, and the consolidation of Xi Jinping's policies more vigorously. So all these things are at play. All these variables are at play. So while we focus in the run-up to the delayed third plenum, or even look at issues why the delay was caused and what can we expect to happen at the third plenum in July, and of course we also have the meetings at Paitaha also scheduled in that. So all these things are in the run-up, and we hope in this over the next hour or so we look at all of these things and find what is the blueprint or what are the issues at stake for that plenum. So I propose to do this in two rounds. The first round, where all the three panelists will be looking at the two sessions itself. We'll begin from there. What are the learnings from those discussions? What are the documents saying? The documents basically give a sign of what the Chinese party state is looking forward. So that gives an idea. So what is that talking about? What are the deliberations and discussions that were focused? What do they indicate? And in that, and also then we come to the political part of it as well. So once that is done, in the second round, we will then look at what is expected at the third plenum, or how in the run up from now to the third plenum, what are the things that are happening, and how might we look at what might be expected or what might be the expected outcomes from that important plenum. So the first round, each of the speaker will have about 8 to 10 minutes. And then we will, in the second round, I think each speakers, as we have discussed, maybe we could take again 5 to 7 minutes or 8 minutes, and then leave a lot of scope for question answers, because I also see a good number of audience have turned up for this important. So even if you have done this exercise late, I think this is still a very relevant and worthwhile thing which we are doing at this point of time. So without further ado, I think I'll hand it over to the panelists. Maybe we will go first with Arvind, because we are going to be largely be talking, or at least a good part of our discussion is going to be on economy. So what are the economic questions? How are they playing as a challenge? And what is the party state's response to that as emerging from the documents and the discussions? So Arvind, over to you.
Thank you, Anand, the chair. And also I thank ICS for organizing this important event on language. It was long due, yes, but this is an important exercise, I think, which ICS has been doing quite regularly over the years. Since I'm referring to the work report presented by Li Qiang, I'll stick to it. I've got 8 minutes, so I'll divide it into two parts. One is I will refer to the work report and come back to my comments in the second half. When I refer to the work report, there are three parts, interestingly, I'm looking at. How Li Qiang has concluded the overall summing up of the report. That's one. Second thing is that what are the challenges he thinks there are important for the party and the state to deal with. And third important thing, what are the important goals it is going to, it is proposing, the work report is proposing in front of the Chinese state. First important thing is when we talk about China, something which is obvious, which is happening in China in past couple of years post-pandemic, is slowing down, and this slowing down has been creating a lot of problem of static and dynamic in nature, and structural and institutional also. Most importantly, which Li Qiang touches upon, he brings out about 6 important points when he sums up the report. Starting with, he emphasizes that how it was important for the party state to regulate the macroeconomic changes or transitions of recoveries. The important first factor which Li Qiang touches upon is how the growth has been simulated and how that has been, helped China to get the traction. He mentions about, how the additional tax and fee relief measures have resulted into savings exceeding 2.2 trillion yuan. And he again underlines that, how additional 1 trillion yuan of treasury bonds were issued by the state. Important thing, what he mentions over here is that the receipts, which China depends mostly as far as the growth is concerned, is an important, serious reason for the Chinese state to mull over. The receipts are going weaker, because as every one of us know that, why macroeconomic level reforms and regulatory reforms are important for state is because if the industries, if the manufacturing, if the services are not performing well, there will be enough receipts the Chinese state can think about, in terms of revenue, which is weakening over the period of time. The second important factor which Li Qiang touches upon is the industrial upgrading, and where he talks about 5G upgrading, he talks about how the urban resident and populations are focusing more on high quality development and in key industrial chains. You have heard about Puxi and Pudong, but Shanghai is going to build a new Shanghai, which is in Lingang industrial area. These are the new models Li Qiang is underlining, saying, these are the new models the Chinese cities need to underline, calling industrial upgrading through innovation and new momentums. The third important factor which Li Qiang underlines, saying is that, we need to deepen reforms. And when he says that deepen reforms, he is a bit of candid, and he says that we need to build unified national markets. So as far as I understand, what is unified national market is that so far there were provincial interpretations of reforms where the provincial leaders could interpret what the state or the Beijing wants, but rather here the central leadership are saying that there has to be one national market instead of having several sub-national markets, several local markets. So what does it mean? It means that there is a synchronous dynamism being brought out in production, supplies, and consumption, which is very important when China talks about deepening of reforms. Importantly, in his speech, Li Qiang underlines that there has to be rising level of foreign investments coming into China. This is very important. Why? Because China has been putting a lot of force and and insistence that the foreign investment should rise. If you remember, for past 2 years after Evergrande crisis, the institutional investors, the QA1 investors, QA2 investors have taken back their investments from China. So for China, it is very important to reassure the investors that the Chinese state has has determined that it will open up further. Then fourth one, China talks about, the Li Qiang talks about improving environment and accelerated transition to the model of green development. Do not forget, green development is a new auxiliary wheel of Chinese growth. The Chinese enterprises which are investing into R&D with regard to green development, green ecology, green technology is colossal. And Li Qiang wants to emphasize that, we need to take care of green development. And he puts in green development in the context of addressing the issues with regard to ecosystem, environmental, pollution, so on and so forth. Fifth important thing where Li Qiang underlines is the public well-being, advancing the public health. This is again with regard to the questions which were raised by pandemic. And the last issue which he talks about is improving government performances across board and redoubled efforts to enhance governance. This is important because Li Qiang has incorrectly said, he comes out very heavily when he concludes his overview of the performance of the economy last 1 year, where he says that there has been rising challenges and rising problems with regard to pointless formalities and bureaucratism. Okay, and he says that bureaucratism remain acute, and which is an important problem for reforms and development. He again underlines the questions of unemployment, innovation and IT, and overall economic recovery. Now I'll go to the second and third part of my evaluations, where Li Qiang says that there are some important tasks, or the guidelines which the Chinese enterprises, Chinese economic institutions need to cater, need to look into, and need to take into consideration. And he underlines 5 important factors in this. He underlines that deepening of reform across the board is inevitable. He is trying to somewhere hint and give an impression that China would continue to reform. Now, what China means by deepening reforms is still quite cryptic over here, because we do not see China explicitly talking about which sectors, what is the timeline when China talks about deepening of reforms, how much of deepening of it. There is no word about it, but we have to guess about it. We'll go into that in the second form. Achieve greater self-reliance, strength in science and technology. Do not forget, China's way to reforms and deepening reforms and climbing up to the next level of achieving the growth, even if 5%, 4.8%, will only be enabled by focusing on self-reliance. China has been fighting hard to build its laboratories, S&T institutions to deliver it. Quite number of times in last year and early this year, Xi Jinping has been mentioning it that there are lacking deliverables by the scientific institutions when it comes to growth. It is not happening. So Li Qiang points out that there has to be more emphasis on innovations and self-reliance. Next important thing is strengthening macro regulations. Um, what happened in Changzhou last year, what happened in most of the smaller banks, or what happens in the financial institutions is that there is absolute lack of coherence with regard to lending, with regard to credit, with regard to raising or ensuring the consumers that they can take credits. Infusion of confidence, and this infusion of confidence is important and a core factor of macro regulation. This has not been done. It's not Li Qiang or the former premier Li Keqiang or Xi Jinping need to keep doing this thing, but other institutions also need to infuse this confidence which China lacks, which is an important goal for China to take it forward. And this is importantly linked by Li Qiang to the structural reforms. And structural reforms are an important thing. Remember when China talks about new era of development, new vehicles of development, new dynamism of development, what it essentially talks about, it has to move forward from the existing old gyrated structures or institutions which China depended upon for past 50 years. And that transition has to happen smoothly. You cannot talk about macro regulation, supervisions, without structures looking promising. That has been China doing it. When structures, institutions look robust to take off any reforms and transformations, the regulations come. This is not the first regulations come. So some Felician points out that the structure are not still in places, are not even mature enough to take the new regulations. So it is important that new regulations would come or follow after there is a structural readjustment taken care of. Now, with regard to important targets, that is the end of my first part of the presentation. He talks about a few important targets for the upcoming year, and which is very important. First thing is GDP growth of around 5%. Well, 5% looks quite achievable, but most important thing over here is that when Chinese state and party says that it is 5%, it is somewhere trying to reflect and give an impression to people, businesses, managers, institutions, and various economic institutions is that, well, go for 5%. More than 5% is always good for it. But interestingly, the Chinese party, the Communist Party and the Chinese state has been expecting the growth somewhere between 4.8% and 5%. Recently, IMF also said that Chinese economy is going to grow at 4.8%. But the magic figure of 5% also underlines that whether the Chinese state is going to come up with any stimulus package or not. If China is going to put that bar of 5%, that indicates that the Chinese state may not come with a stimulus package. But that's a worrisome figure. So you can look at this magic number 5 in two ways. Number 2 is over 12 million new urban jobs. Well, that looks quite interesting, quite challenging. Well, 12 million jobs when Li Qiang talks about, again, taking Anand's point over here, that is just a static number. It is not a dynamic number Li Qiang is talking about. That is the lowest number he's keeping out. Because if you put the re-employment, you put the youth employment, if you put about the graduate employment, that job requirement is somewhere about 20 million. So 12 million creating job is something, below the expectation. Li Qiang is putting that number, I think he's strictly taking out from the graduates number, saying that, okay, this is what we're going to create. But the new matrix of creating an employment looks a little problematic to me, looking at the work report. Third important thing is surveyed urban unemployment rate of 5.5%. I feel that 5.5% of urban unemployment rate is again little difficult for the Chinese state to achieve. Because why I'm saying so, when China is making a transition from manufacturing to the high value industries, and anyway, the high value industries are always low labor intensive. Those are not labor intensive industries. That means there are no jobs have been created. More investment is done into the high intensive R&D sector, but those are not high intensive or labor intensive sectors. So that means that there is a rising number of valley there. The Chinese government and state has to address, which is not being considered over there. That's number one. Second thing, while the manufacturing sector is giving room for the R&D services, there is a rising number of unemployment, urban employment in that sector. And third sector importantly is in past 3 years, the salaries of service sectors have been brought down by 30%. I'm saying brought down. That means there is intervention by the state. The salaries is not being fixed by the enterprise independently, but there is an uproar in China, in urban China, that what on earth these people do, financial services do, they're getting high salaries. The salaries of these people has been reduced by 30%. That means that there are more people now opting out of financial sector and looking for new enterprises, starting new things. So that means that it is not 5.5%, it may be somewhere about 6.5% and 7%. That's quite challenging for China. CPI increase about 3%. Now, that looks pretty challenging to me because if you look at the present figure, the consumer price index, it was perfectly 5.4% in the first quarter. We are in the second quarter, and seasons do important play over here, apart from the economic transitions also. First quarter was, yes, Spring Festival and all the festivities, consumer price index really grew up. But if you look, what is happening since late 2021 until today, that is about middle of 2022, the CPI has been falling consistently. And that means there is a rising pressure on the state to infuse confidence. And why this is happening? Because there is a rising tension between what has been the expectations of the state and what is actually happening. Well, when we talk about CPI, and then this is
Arvind, sorry to just interview. Maybe you can just wrap up the first part because we also have.
In just 1 minute. In just 1 minute. Now, important thing, when we talk about the CPI, but I know, and when we try to put it vis-a-vis the production indexes, that has been also consistently falling down. I'll go to the next point, and two more important factors Li Qiang points out and says that that's a goal of the Chinese state in the coming 1 year. The first one is the basic equilibrium in balance of payments. That is also not going to happen because the rising level of remittances, which is happening out of China, of the foreign enterprises and the overseas Chinese, is continuously increasing. That makes the job hard for Mr. Li Qiang. And the last factor, continued improvement in the environment. Well, that looks a positive factor, but that also means that when you're talking about green economy, green technology, and then the technology which is going to cater about the ecosystem environment, that means you need to put in more money. So you would say that the report looks quite critical. Li Qiang was pretty critical about few factors. In this report, at only one place he mentions BRI. Nowhere he mentions about made in China, which has simply evaporated in thin air. So somewhere the leadership is losing confidence. Sorry to blunt, but I think all would like to hear clear lines from you that there is lowering confidence by the leaders also, by people, by enterprises in China's economy. Somewhere that is going to be the main challenge for the third plenum, which I will come later on. Thank you, Anand.
Thanks so much, Arvind. In fact, there were a lot of points, and sorry, I had to jump you to conclude fast. Of course, there is so much in that report, and especially when you're putting that in the context of what China is undergoing economically, each of those issues or each of those things you have raised or even not raised becomes more and more salient. So I'll now quickly move on to the next speaker, my colleague here at the Himalayan Center in Shivnadar University, and who especially looks at frontier regions and especially focusing on budgetary allocations. So that, like Devendra, he is going to focus more on budget allocations and also looking at what the center also give to the states. So that is something which he is also now increasingly working on as part of his study on Tibet and also the Tibet Aid program. So maybe Devendra can also bring in some of the things from the two sessions, which are also important for regions such as Tibet and Xinjiang, towards the at half of regions where ethnic minority populations are significant, which maybe he can include in the later part of his presentation. Over to you, Devendra.
Okay, thank you, Anand. Thank you for organizing this panel and giving me this opportunity to speak. And good afternoon, everyone. So what I'll do is I'll speak about the budgetary allocations and some of the highlights, then challenges that come out of the budget report and the two government report presented by Li Qiang. And I do not intend to talk about everything about the budget. What I'll do is highlight some of the issues and then take these discussions to the next round of discussion. Now, on the whole, the both budget report and government report, they frame the issues, challenges, and priorities in the backdrop of the post-COVID recovery. And in continuation with previous reports, the budget report as well as government report paint a picture of the fiscal revenue and expenditure prospectus is as quite grave, which means that the government has been has to put in a lot of money through preferential tax and fee policies and the special purpose bonds, etc. So the revenue is, receipt prospectus is not that good. And then in terms of expenditure, there has to be more allocation to local governments, especially county level governments. So on the whole, what the picture painted in the government report and budget report is that there is a difficult situation. And so in continuation again with previous periods, what the report says is that we will be focused on progress while ensuring stability, which means that there is unlikely to be any drastic shift in monetary or fiscal policies, and the government is likely to continue with the mix of various policy instruments such as special purpose bonds, ultra long term special government bonds, preferential tax and fee policies, and government subsidies. And another aspect of the budget report is that the fiscal deficit is again targeted at 3.5%, and GDP is around 5.5%. On the fiscal front, I think overall, the report and the budget report provide paint a very quite positive picture. But here, when we look at the trends of fiscal deficit in the last 10 years, we see that the fiscal deficit is rising, and when we have to combine the fiscal deficit in the central budget with other budgets, then the actual deficit will be much higher. And this, there are references to the issues related to this, and Arvind has highlighted about balance sheet and other things. Then let me come to the spending priorities that come out of the budget. Overall, there are 5 areas which have seen 5% or more growth from the previous year, that is 2022. That is foreign affairs, which has seen a steep rise from 2022 to 23. And it is primarily because during the COVID-19, the physical diplomatic activities were halted. So there was a sharp drop. And there is now again a sharp rise in on expenditure on foreign affairs related activities. Then social security and employment is another area which has seen a higher growth rate from the previous year. Science and tech, which has seen, in fact, science and tech has seen double the growth in expenditure from the previous year in 2023. Then agriculture, forestry and water, rural and urban development. All these five areas have seen the growth rate of expenditure of 5% or more. The defense expenditure remains constant, although it is steadily rising, but there is no drastic change as such in the terms of the growth rate. On public security, there is 1.4% rise in expenditure from expected from 2023, which is again constant from previous years. But there is a mention of increasing expenditure on people's armed police, which may indicate that there is likely to the budget more expenditure or funds for armed police in the coming year from the previous year. But overall public security budget is uh, in expectation with the previous patterns. And this public the idea, I mean, the mention that the public security budget, especially on people's armed police, will be increased, which is on par with other key priority sectors, which are mentioned that we have obligation to increase funding on areas like national defense, science, technology, education, national reserves, and government bond issues and interest payments. Now, interest payment or debt servicing is again an issue that has that is highlighted in the report. And if we see in the trends over last 10 years, we see that the debt servicing is increasing. And we in the 2023, we have seen 11% or so increase in debt servicing, which is quite high. Science technology 8% growth from 2022, but it is double the growth then. So there is an increase in expenditure on science and technology. Now, at the local level, and this is an issue that I'll come back in the next round again, but the financial or fiscal situations of local government is very much highlighted in the report as well as in the government report. And again, this issue has come up in the previous meetings, like fourth meeting of Central Commission for Deepening Reform, then Central Economic Reform, Central Economic Conference in December, and in Politburo, and also statements from meetings of senior leaders. And these are that the local governments have been facing fiscal problems, especially since COVID-19, and a primary problem is the decline in the sale of land and revenue that local government used to get. So now in the budget report and government report, what is mentioned is that the basic idea, aim is to focus on three priorities, which is to pay salaries on time, to run the administrative or state affairs normally, and spend on public services. Now again, in the last 1 year, we have seen that there are three ways in which the central governments has tried to um, bail out the local governments through special purpose bonds and then ultra long-term bonds. And one of the highlights of this, I mean, one of the changes is that these this money would be spent not only on infrastructure and other big projects, but also this will include establishing 5G stations, EV charging stations, renovation of urban villages, etc., and other public services, which means that these special payments or transfers are aimed at making up for the decline in the land sales. There's again a mention of new industrialization, which basically means using or promoting tech-driven innovation in manufacturing and other supply chain at different levels of supply chains. And it's a part of larger a series of policies under the umbrella of industrial upgrading. And there are also new growth engines which are highlighted, especially in the government report, which are commercial space industry, low altitude economy, and emerging industry, future oriented industries, etc. So there's a special, that central government will spend some amount on science and technology and basic research, uh, and focus on key national strategic areas and tasks. And in terms of budget allocation to minority areas, there's only short and brief mention about that central government will continue to allocate transfer payment to super faster development to support faster development in old revolutionary base areas, areas with large minority populations, and border areas, as well as initiative to boost development and raise living standards in border areas, which is in general. We do not see any special mention or change from previous periods, but we will see in the next round that there is again there is a likely it is likely that there will be more focus on Western development, etc. And this is what is being hinted through recent meetings. Now, in terms of challenges, local government, I have mentioned, it's a big issue. And especially when there's a lot of the issue concern of local government debt and how to bail them out. So there is more, now mention of more oversight and digitalization of budget management at local levels, and then and the idea that the provincial governments have to be proactive in allocating direct transfer funds to local level governments, and then that the 1 trillion bonds and ultra long bonds, etc., and sovereign bonds, these are the fiscal initiatives which are directly aimed at the financial situation of local governments. And a second big challenge which comes out of these two reports is that there are certain key risk areas and which have been talked about for last few years, which are property market, local debt, SOE debts, and small and medium financial institutions. And the report mentions the risk as acute in these areas, which means that they're likely that we'll see more, focus in statements, in policies on these areas, including the 5 yearly reform of party and state institutions and remolding of financial regulatory institutions. That's it, Anand. I'll come back to in some of these issues in the second round.
Thanks, Devendra. In fact, I was just about to tell you to wrap up, but thank you for that wonderful exercise. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to look at the budget. These are all maths and figures, so one needs to really look at them very closely and to call out what is relevant and what's more important. In fact, I found your the initial part of the foreign, the rise in the foreign affairs budget, and also the expenditure increase in the PAP, which I think every year has also been going up. And of course, that I think one thing which constantly goes through the report also is about stability. So I guess that always is paramount for the CPC. Also, so the last speaker in this first round is Bheem, and so what we are trying to also understand through Bheem is also there is the political part of it. I mean, yes, there is economy, there are these questions, there are the challenges, but how is the party getting itself ready for these challenges, both in terms of administrative changes, the constant ideological program which Xi Jinping is running, or even personal. I mean, we have seen at least in the last 1 year, three main persons, the foreign minister, the defense minister, now the agriculture minister, who has been removed post in the anti-corruption campaign. So what is driving that? And of course, the anti-corruption campaign has also extended its reach into the financial sector. So what does this all mean in terms of the political part of it, the party particular part of it? So over to you, B.
Thank you, Anand, for actually organizing this panel, and my congratulations to other panelists as well. And also, I thank ICS for organizing this very important discussion. And I think, as I said before, that this discussion actually segues between these two, Liang Poi and the third plenum that is going to come in July. I think it's not late yet. So I think it's the right time that we'll be discussing, and after the third plenum, a further discussion would really help us to really rethink what we are talking about. So as the chair, Anand has just said, that I'll be talking more on the politics part of it, and definitely with the party, and how to read these reports, and what I see by reading these reports especially. And if I see this report, and if I read them very critically, I would see very much a party written document rather than a state council written document. You see, in most of the places, you always say central committee discussions said this, central committees, advisory regulations, and a lot of party signature in the report itself. So that is one. The other thing is also with how Li Chang, as a premier, when he gives his speech during the Liang Po, he also tries to bring in how he is trying to pay his obeisance to the great leader, that is to the president and the general secretary of the party. You could see everywhere it is that. Unlike the previous documents that you read, if it was under the previous premier, Li Chang, you would see a different kind of report being prepared. But here you could see most of them really leading to that kind of a report being made. And the third is, if I have to really look into, is also with regard to the reference on the governance. How the party and the state, that is the government and the party, really discussing on governance. It definitely tries to, acknowledge a lot of issues, lot of misgovernance also with regard to anti-corruption campaign, and reference to a lot of, with regard to a lot of numbers. But at the same time, actually, the party is really trying to encapsulate whatever still existing autonomy that the government had, that is the state council, you could say. And having said that, we really have to look at this report or the Liang Hua documents with regard to some of the reforms that happen in the organic law of the state council itself. Now today, in March, what we see is there has been a revision of the organic law of the state council, where it definitely says that the party is all comprehensive, powerful, and it has to have control over the functioning of the state council. It not only talks about the personnel of the state council, it also talks about the revision of the constitutional status of the state council itself. So how does that show? So we really have to look this report in that two aspects. How the power of the state council, the most powerful institute, the state institution or agency of implementing work, has really been subsumed under, or so to say, in the new Xi Jinping era, that the control. And that is why we also see that Li Chang's or the premier's final speech, press conference, was missing this time. And that was highly reported in the media. Now, if you also see into how these regulations or reorganization of or restructuring of the state and the party institution is, that in that context, we also see that the state council's organic law had just 11 articles before. Today, I think after March, we see it has at least 20 articles. And these articles, if you read them very critically, you could see repetition of whatever was there in the state, in the article of the of the PRC, and as well as the party. You could see that. So that is one. Sorry, that is the other thing. That the role of the party and the state institution here, or restructuring, has really actually reading these report will show that. And today, the party not only tries to see or look at how the state council is making this document or formulating these work report or other NDRC reports, but it also has the power today to really supervise these reports through its various, institutions such as reporting or submission of proposals to the central committee, and as well as reporting its primary preliminary documents to the party itself. And the most important executive decisions that the state council have to take place, that has to be submitted mandatory to the central committee. So these are some of these actually institutions or regulations that the party has really looked into these reports. And other important perspectives or the discussion that we see today in the basis of the report is, as both Dr. Arvind and Dr. Devendra talked about, is innovation. Now, if you remember, if Jiang Zemin was the father of bringing the theory of three represents, that is bringing advanced cultural, asset forces, productive forces in the party. Now, Xi Jinping is talking about new qualitative productive forces. Therefore, the very bedrock of these idea is innovation. Now, these are new qualitative, productive forces that it's Xinchi Sangchangli. Now, this definitely talks about the new type of. Now, that is very, very important and are also very forthcoming. And that brings in definitely how the party and the state or the government is really looking to, addressing or challenging or want to take the party and its development project in the future. So having said that, so with these now, with new ideas such as new productive forces that was being launched in Heilongjiang last year, and the economic work conference that happened in December. So since then onwards, you would see these slogans coming into the in the party document, and as well as it is found also in the work report. Now, this definitely shows that how the priorities that Dr. Devendra and Dr. Arvind were talking about before, the priorities of the party state. Now, and also the functioning of the state council itself. Now, as I said before, that it was answerable to the central committee's functioning and the NPC, that is National People's Congress Standing Committee. But also, it also says that with the new reforms or new revision of the organic law of the state council, we could also see that the role of the advisory body, that is Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, that has the role of these advisory body has actually been more. I mean, its power has increased in vis-a-vis supervising even the state council. So that shows that it says that in the last page of the document, it shows the democratic supervision of the CPCCC. So this shows that how the party is controlling the state council via not only the National People's People's Congress Standing Committee before, but today even through the advisory body. So I think I'll stop here. Some of the nuances, I think I'll talk in the other discussion, which actually would be better. I think I'll stop here. So since Liang Hui although has political, but most of it's government reports, so I would rather discuss later in some of in the Q&A or in the second section. Thank you, Anand. Yeah.
Thanks, Beam. That was really wonderful to hear, because we have to also try to make sense of what is the politics behind all this. So I think you really some of your points are worth talking about, especially the near collapse. I mean, we keep talking about, is there any more separation between the party and the state, and it looks like there has been an absolute collapse. So my next round, we will start now on the plenum itself. What can be expected? That is what we are looking for. I had initially given you about 8 minutes, what I had initially proposed. I think for greater participation, and also because we have a good audience and I am sure there will be a lot of questions, maybe we'll just keep to about 4 to 5 minutes at the max for each of you on what do you think is going to happen at the plenum. Is that going to be in the light of these discussions? And also, please bring in whatever is happening from now to the plenum. Xi Jinping is meeting private corporates or people who are important in the know-how, especially organizing these meetings. The Politburo has also met. And in fact, one of the things which is emerging, which also was touched upon by Arvind, is about the new urbanization. So Central China's urbanization is now being increasingly focused upon in that discussion. And we all know what Wuhan has had in the pandemic itself. So is this a sign of refurbishing Wuhan's image, or even is there any other messaging also emerging out of that? So we could all thrash that out. So 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes to all three of you. And maybe in this round, maybe I'll start with Devendra first. Devendra, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, the timing is Hi.
Just give me 1 minute. In the meanwhile, could I ask all of you to also start typing and sending in your questions, because that will also be easy for us as soon as we end this to get on to that. So please do use the chat box to send in your questions. Yeah. Yes, Devin.
Okay, so let me start with the controversy itself, why it was postponed and what's its significance. Obviously, there is a shift in timing. Last time in the 19th Party Congress, the third plenum happened quite early, just after the second plenum, and it included the plan for reform of party and state institutions, which this time in 20th Party Congress, the second plenum actually dealt with that issue. However, I think why it was postponed, its significance. Obviously, there is a violation of the established traditions before 2017. After that, last time also they had shuffled the timing of the two plenums, second and third, and one of the points which I want to make about the significance or whether it matters is that under Xi Jinping, the economic policy making has already been centralized. So most of the decision making, I think, or the ideas that come out of on major policy issues comes out from the Central Commission for Deepening Reform. And I think we have to look at the meetings, the Central Economic Conference in December, then fourth meeting of the Central Commission for Deepening Reform in Feb, and then Politburo meetings to see what is coming. What are the hints about the potential agenda for the third plenum, and there has been a lot of there has been a lot of efforts to counter the perception that there is some bigger issues with the economy, and that is why the plenum has been postponed, etc. And we see these efforts through media, then senior leaders meeting delegations of businesses, including foreign private businesses. Then NDRC opened a new section for the private businesses, etc. And all these efforts are to tackle the perception that there is some bigger issue and whether it is economic or leadership. So in terms of what could be on the table for the third plenum in terms of long-term reforms, because it's now been 10 years and a lot of people are expecting that there might be some big bang reforms or in certain areas. And so that also might be one reason that they wanted to wait for a few more months to see the recovery and then see what reform they can go ahead with. So there are three or four big issues that, big agenda or items that come out of these meetings, which I mentioned in December, Feb, Politburo meeting, and then the Central Commission for Deepening Reform. One is that all these meetings, as media and other statements, they emphasize commitment to further deepening of reform. And now we have seen in the last 1 year, there's more focus on deepening of reform to further Chinese modernization. That's one. And so we can expect that in terms of framing the further policy plans, etc., we'll see more focus on high quality development, new productive forces, Chinese modernization, etc. Now there's something called system integration. This basically refers to um, financial remolding of financial institution or regulatory institutions, and then broadly parties control over economy. And this has again has been highlighted in all these meetings, including government report, the Central Economic Conference in December, the fourth meeting of this Central Commission for Deepening Reform, and in the Shantung or Jinan symposium that Xi chaired last week. And so this basically means that they'll further emphasize on a greater control of party over economy, and through the implementation of the ongoing reform of party and state institutions. And there is a special.
Devendra, I think you'll have to wrap up quickly, maybe with
Okay.
Yeah.
And second hint that we get is that there is a lot of focus on innovation and self-reliance, which is in continuation with the previous period. But there are two areas which I think will get further, focus, which is urban-rural integration and regional coordinated development plans. And these are plans which are also connected with another big issue that Arvind mentioned in the first round, which is creating a unified domestic market. And here we can see, I think there are hints that there will be more reforms, especially in this electricity sector or other such areas. The third item, which is really, I think this is more likely than other areas, is that the fiscal and tax reforms below provincial levels. And it is highlighted in all these documents and meetings, and it is coming out of these meetings as a prominent issue. And as I mentioned in the first round, that the local governments are facing real challenges, and the concerns among for central policymakers about local debt and their financial situation, I think it's highlighted as reasons for further, tax sharing and fiscal reforms at the local level. And this is because it's also coming after 10 years of implementation of budget law in 2014. So I see that there is likely big bang reform in the fiscal system below the province. And
Devendra, I think we can stop there.
Just one more point. And I mean, on whether there will be more fiscal stimulus or package or something like that, I think there is a clear hint that they'll go on ahead with the existing policy of mixed with various instruments that I mentioned in the previous round. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Devendra. Quickly, Bheem, maybe 3 to 4 minutes to bring in. I'll bring Arvind at the end of as the last speaker. So, Bheem. Is Bheem here?
I think he dropped out, joined again, and then again dropped out.
Yeah, Bheem, you're on mute. Okay, maybe then Arvind can take over. I mean, for 3 to 4 minutes, Arvind.
Okay. Thank you, Anand. I mean, quickly wrapping it up. Well, things look pretty in control. 5.5% of growth. I mean, it doesn't look very stellar task for the leadership. The important thing for the leadership is how they're going to do that. This big how, HOW, is going to create a lot of back pain for the Chinese leaders. I'm telling you why, because the leaders are counting upon the existing institutions which are transitioning, and they're working on using the existing dynamics to help the leadership to sustain. But that doesn't look really promising. Why I'm saying this thing? Because the youth do not look at economy as something promising. Okay, they do not look confident of economy. They do not look like taking risks. This is not the same generation which was in 60s and 70s, which was plunging into economics. They were ready to go in the market, hanging, boards, whatever they could get around their neck and sell whatever they could have. But then the present generation youth doesn't look the risk taker. Doesn't look like they are ready to get into the competition, and this is quite drastic thing. And let's talk empirically. When we talk about consumer price index, and when we talk about the producer price index, producer price index has dropped more accelerated rate than the CPI. What does that mean? That means that an entrepreneur, a manufacturer, a producer really does not trust in the market. They're ready to lie below the ground, below the price levels. It is not believing in any stimulus package given by the state. As a manufacturer, he should struggle. He should go for more lending. He should go for more borrowing. He should go for more inventions. Inventions can happen by taking something, by taking more risks, which is not happening. You take, for example, electric vehicles. Okay, how many units were produced and sold? Okay, that's a staggering number. But if you look at the rate at which they're sold, the prices, they're absolutely low. And how much of the stimulus package the bank can keep on giving it, because it is not translating into something else. Now, this brings to a major question. If China is really counting upon consumer consumption, that is not really going to work, because the final consumption of GDP is not going to substantially increase. It will not increase from somewhere in more from 1% to 10%. It is not going to increase. And if Chinese government is absolutely believing that it is the consumption which is going to give us a lend it hand, and it can again take off, no, that is not going to happen. Because important thing is, along with the consumption, capital formation has been an important player in GDP, China GDP. So if consumption is falling, the government has to make sure that the capital formation will come as one of the big help or magic wand. That is not really happening. You look at the number of broad number, with regard to infrastructure investments, with regard to investment growth, with regard to state development investments, they all have been decelerating. People do not find any interest. For example, there is a clear drop in new house being constructed after the Evergrande happened. Banks are not ready to know who is going to borrow money from them. So the question is that creating this huge backwater expectations, and for the state, and state has a very small nose to control it. with the limited or directed levers and this with the small nose, the Chinese state is in a situation which was, a difficult spot. Now, I mentioned about the factor old institutions, old thinking. Now, what China has been thinking, the middle income group will increase from 400 million to 800 million in next 15 years. But that's just a hypothesization. Now, they also believe that the upper middle income and high income household will increase from 200 million to approximately 260 million by 2030. That is again the hypothesization. That hypothesization was done when the Chinese economy was really doing great. Last 1 minute. Now, with regard to education is concerned, I just give you the numbers. Okay. Now, 12 million are just the graduates. Not those who are, laid off workers or restructuring. Nobody's calculating on them. And, we are yet to reach the median number where the graduates will decrease. We're talking about these people who are graduating at the age of 22 who were enrolled 20 years back with the drop-off rate of 30%. So 30% are not here. So we include that 15 million plus 30%. That number is going to really give you, feelers, where what the things are becoming difficult for the Chinese. How many are the total teachers in China? 12 million graduates. There are 18 million teachers. And yes, what Devendra said, is government going to give the stimulus package? I don't think so. It's a hard budget constraint. You stay, you survive, you get with it. Otherwise, you have to just exit the market. This is becoming difficult. The way Li Chang is speaking, the way Xi Jinping is speaking, they're speaking very hard language for businesses. They are not talking very, cloudy pictures, and that is something change. Because one more factor, if I can just take 10 more seconds, the trade surplus which everybody talks about China is going to remain same. That is dropping by muted 0.06%, but that also is dropping. So there is no money being, no capital, no wealth is generated here, and there is a rising pressure on Chinese state. So the third plenum is all about how this pressure, balance sheet, how this summing up of the work they did is going to trigger the next round of things for the Chinese leadership. That is going to be quite interesting and dramatic to see in the third plenum. I'll stop here.
Thanks, Arvind. In fact, just one line to add. I think that even within youth unemployment, when they are talking about the focus has always been on these graduates moving out every year, passing out. There are a lot of people who would not necessarily have continued after the school education. There is a significant young population who are also in that job market without necessarily going to the universities. Somehow these numbers do not capture them. So that is another challenge, I believe, which is, there's of course, there's also literature on this trend too. So thanks, Arvind. Now, quickly, Bheem, I'm really sorry, but just 3 to 4 minutes just to wrap it up, Bheem, and we will then open it out.
Yeah, thank you, Anand. I won't take much nonetheless. Actually, my network actually went off. So that's what I'm using my hotspot. Yeah. So what do we see for the third plenum? So if you have to really look into, for the economic side, both Arvind and Devendra just spoke. But if I have to really look on the politics of it, the third plenum usually, it is the economics. So, but if you have to see the present functioning of the government, actually the state council is really needs to have at least 2 incumbent state councillors getting elected to the state council, I guess. So as state councillors, because Tong Chun, the general who has been nominated as the national defense minister, he has to be promoted as a state council. That is one. The other one is with regard to the foreign ministry. Wang Yi he being the director of the Central Foreign Affairs Commission, he really is in a deep need, although he is a very, important and a most experienced hand. with regard to foreign affairs, I think his deputy in the state council is I think needed. I think in the third plenum, likely there could be some getting appointed to the state council, because on the state part of it, you have seen Peng Chun being as minister, but you don't have somebody, but he is still not the state councillor, so he has to be promoted. It cannot be just as a central committee member, the Minister of Defense. So likewise, I think we could also see a foreign minister or a deputy foreign minister, although there are already quite a few assistant foreign minister and vice ministers. But I think Minister for External Affairs would be there one. So the other part of really looking into is actually also trying to see how the party, although the state and the party reforms or a restructuring plan is on. So we could also see, because 2021 to 2025 next year, so there's a national, there's a there's a national plan project with regard to law-based governance in China. So I think 2025 is that. And if you remember the 18th Party Congress 4th Plenum and the 19th Party plenums, and I think the one that has been already been there in a second plenum of the 20th Party Congress, you could really see how the law-based governance in China would be really getting shape in the third plenum also. But the fourth plenum would be more crucial, therefore. So this institutionalization of some of the norms, which has been already been there in the state, could be more, regularized within the party structure. Nonetheless, I think the most important is filling of these positions lying vacant for quite some time. So I'll stop here for now.
Thanks, Beam. So that was really comprehensive. I mean, we touched upon, began with the two sessions, and then we have really looked at some amount of crystal ball gazing at what will happen in July, or even the possibility, even they say a day or a week is too long in politics. There is a whole month left, before the plenum convenes. So we really ought to pay close attention to what are the things that are happening, both in terms of the meetings, the discourse, and also the politics which is going to play out. And so that is something really important. So we will now open this up. I do not see any questions in the chat box. So maybe we can use, people can raise their hands, and then we can raise, I'll then point out to people to ask their questions. Or is there already? No. So or is there a question? Alok, I think he has a point. So Alok, can you unmute and ask your question, because the comment is quite big. Yeah, yes, Alok. Is there a problem at Alok's end in terms of? Okay. So if either of you, all three of you, can see his point, you want to?
So I will quickly intervene here.
Yes,
See, Alok, see, what has been happening is the state has been trying to reconnect with not only with the private businesses, but also trying to emphasize more on the capital expenditure. I was talking about capital formation, so right? State has limitations now, and over the period of past 5 to 6 years, the private enterprises have lost substantial amount of interest in any projects state deploys. And there has been, rising number of engagements by the state council and state council bodies to engage with the private enterprises. And if we can take some of the, qualitative optics to measure, how that is happening. You can also check with most of the pilot projects which the state was deploying and was leaving it to the provinces to run it. It is not seen that way. The central planners, the central leadership are coming on the ground, convincing the leadership, because they do not trust anymore the provinces. The bonds issued by the provinces or by the sub-provincial enterprises, sub-provincial institutions. So yes, you can see that as one part of instilling this confidence, but also instilling confidence. Attending these forums is not for the business leaders also, but largely for the economy, because until businesses are going adventurous or thinking out of the box, the banks and financial institutions won't be looking happy. Until the financial institutions, banks are not going to look happy, and they're not going to use that heavy household investments. That is not going to change the situation. So this has all dynamo effect. So yeah, partly you can say that the effort is just to make the businesses look confident and take risks.
Okay. To add to what Arvind just said, this meeting in a symposium in Shantung was part of this, because see, the preparation for the plenum, third plenum, starts 6 months in advance. This is what we have seen from the previous period. And it is part of the senior leaders go to the ground and hold such symposium. Last time in the 19th Party Congress before third plenum, the Xi Jinping went to Wuhan for such a symposium, and some of these ideas which were talked about in media later on and official statement, which were part of the third plenum statement also. So I think it's also routine, part of a routine where the senior leader goes to and listens to people what they are saying. And by looking at who attended, there are some economists, reform-minded economists, and there's some SOE leaders and private company CEOs, etc. So this is the part of the pattern in a sense, but of course it is also what Arvind says, part of the larger efforts to convey to the business and people that we are formed for reform, and we are going to stick to it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Devendra. In fact, to add, I think this is not completely a surprise. I mean, in these run-up to short meetings, and even in the run-up to the budget in India, I mean, the finance minister does meet a lot of important people. There are a lot of these small meetings, including with from people from the corporate and business world. So, I mean, this is not out of routine that these things happen. Even the Indian example of the budget is very much there. I think to Ankit's question, I think Arvind has already answered the source. So is there anybody else who has a question?
I want to come in until there is one more question over here.
Yes.
See, importantly, for past 1.5 years, starting from October 2022, the producers' price index dropped by 15%. Phenomenal. It is now minus, actually, somewhere about 0.2%. So to infuse producers that there is a market coming back to you, please trust in the market, please trust in the consumer. That infusion is quite important over here. That is what the state is doing. And one more addition, earlier also, Dr. Devendra was rightly pointing out, how the quarters play an important role. The first quarter is always significant. There are 2 quarters which are very significant in Chinese economic cycle: the first quarter, and then fourth quarter, then the third quarter, then the second quarter. Interestingly, the third plenum is happening after second quarter. Second quarter is actually the bad. It doesn't really add into anything, because second quarter always waits what the language says, what the third plenum says, and it gets into acting with the third and the fourth. Essentially, for past 45 years, it was the fourth quarter, which was third and fourth quarter, which were the dominant, because China was export-oriented market. Mostly they were exporting to the West, and the demands and the shipments and the ships and the supplies used to take the end of the third quarter and the fourth quarter. So one has to also understand the metabolism of the Chinese economy and just not go into these what this news article says, what that news article does not include it. You need to really understand how the Chinese economy functions. You need to understand the atoms of the Chinese economy, why this is happening. So that is very important to all of us who study, including the panelists and chair. For also, it's very important to understand the small atoms, metabolism, how the economy functions, and that is where it becomes challenging to have such discussions where we get into the granular discussions, debates, and talk about these issues.
Thanks, Arvind. Is there a question? Because otherwise, I had a couple which I thought I might just start if others are still thinking about any questions. So let me start off. I think I had a bunch of one, but I think I'll start off with two. I mean, we are of course this is a difficult time for China, and there is a lot of churn, at least economically. There is a lot of difficult phase. But amidst all this, I'm trying to locate whatever Xi Jinping has been talking about, common prosperity. I mean, that seems to be now missing from the lexicon, or at least in these documents. Maybe I might have missed it, but is this evidently not present, or is it still present in some kind of an indirect way? Because even in the midst of the pandemic, was Xi Jinping giving so much emphasis on common prosperity, redistribution of wealth, so on and so forth. I mean, there's so much literature and much has been written on that. But gradually, I think over the last, especially since the Shanghai lockdown and then post, there has been a dialing down. And now it doesn't seem to appear in any of these documents, at least very obviously. I mean, it did make an appearance in the Xi Jinping's report at the 20th Party Congress. There is a significant portion on that, but somehow this is missing, which is what I feel. So what is in with that? And secondly, with the new urbanization, which Arvind has talked about, and even I think Devendra has also alluded to, there is this focus also on a new type of urbanization. I mean, of course, you talked about, but the other thing is hukou is also getting relaxed in a lot of tier 4, tier 5 kind of cities. And there is I think, a conscious effort by the government or the provincial government to actually get people to move in and also acquire property and move in and settle in those cities. So is this also a part of a new urbanization? Is this a very conscious attempt? And will this gradually also then have an effect on the big cities too, to relax? Because right now, even in Zhejiang, for instance, there are other cities in Zhejiang which have started relaxing hukou, but Hangzhou, for instance, has still refused to do so. So how does this then play out? So two questions. Any of or three of you can answer.
Okay, if I can quickly come in and explain. First thing is about the old idioms or the old phrases which Xi Jinping was using, the leaders were using it. It has become, double-edged sword. Okay, for example, the common prosperity has absolutely lost the traction. And when Xi Jinping talks about, moderately prosperous society. So people have started thinking that no risk being taken. Let's not take the risk, but let's look at the moderate living. Okay, there is a new term. Professor Hemant Adlaka was among the audience. There is a term called chuan. So the term called chuan is actually, even you work hard, it is not going to give you promotion. If you work less, it is not going to take anywhere. And if there is a job market which is difficult, and for the employer and employee, they do not want to do anything more. Innovation is stagnated. So the whole Chinese economy is caught into a term called chuan. So remain where you are, enjoy what you are enjoying. Do not struggle too much, actually. And this is being giving hard time for the policymakers. That is not much of metabolism happening. It's simple. hukou, yes, absolutely correct. Hukou has been one of the important bottlenecks for China. And China has been talking. If you sense a plethora of reforms being introduced by the municipalities and the provinces to welcome the new talent program, under Run Sai Chanloi. New talent program, new induction programs, new entrepreneurs program, most of these buildings which were constructed by Wangko and big builders, which the government has bought, now given to these people who are migrating to the newer cities. The restrictions or the academic qualifications to qualify for that has been reduced. So some or the other way, Hukou is not anyway functioning. So there is a rising demand from the provincial leadership saying that why don't you simply just get off Hukou, for a period of 1 or 2 years. That's something important. And third important thing, again, common prosperity, it's fine, but China and Chinese leadership is still slow going as far as the receipts are concerned. Let me come back to this point. State leaders are still not thinking of levying higher amount of taxes, whether it is the land is concerned, whether houses are concerned. That's where the main credit comes in any economy you take it. You just name it. But China is not doing it because there is a rising resistance by these newer rich 400, which is going to be 800, to ultra high rich, which are approximately about 100 million, going to have 300 million. That's a rising pressure on the party. Party has to deal with it. So somewhere about that, they have to come up with a plan which is highly, what you can say, adjusted in the present need. So that's where you see most of these problems are creating more tension for the leadership as well as for the society largely.
Okay, to add to what Arvind just said, there's
Yeah.
obviously no mention of common prosperity. There's at one point the word term income distribution is mentioned, but it's in a different context than common prosperity. But it is indirectly can be interpreted as reference to common, but it's just reference within the broader report at one point. About the new urbanization, the term and whole concept and the related policies comes out of 2014 national new urban type plan from 2014 onwards, and particularly there is a reference to that government will channel more resources to county seats for constructing houses, other amenities, and creating jobs for people who uh, are relocated from rural areas. And this is one big component of this whole plan, new urbanization, new type of urbanization, which focuses on especially on county seats and other towns at the below the big cities. So there is this reference both in the budget report that more resources will be channeled, and then another reference with I think most of there's also urbanization taking place in the minority areas, let's say Qinghai, Kansu, and other areas. And there again, another reference, indirect reference to more resources to that plan is that the government will continue to fund relocation of farmers and herders in these areas. So yeah.
Thanks, Devendra, because I think that Foucault was also important because that has completely been absent even in Xi Jinping's last Party Congress report too. I tried to locate that, and that reference. I mean, usually party reports, the Party Congresses does have a customary mention of Foucault, and last report simply didn't have that mention. So anyway, so there's a question in the chat box, and I think anybody can take that. From Umesh Gupta, it is basically he's asking about whatever is happening in China in terms of an economic challenge and this difficult situation which is existing or what China is undergoing. Is there any effect which might happen for India? I mean, both from a security point of view, foreign policy or economic point of view, what might be there?
So more the challenges, more the unstable China, more aggressive China is actually. So you have to understand that one factor. China would jostle to keep struggling for its own space. That is with regard to strategic and security. With regard to economy, when the other economies are shutting down the doors for the Chinese goods, that means that the high possibility is that the Chinese goods are going to land around India, in India. That's one challenge you have to face. Also, do not forget that there are rising number of trade products. Now, these are not the old products, but new products, innovative products that China has been exporting to India also. So more pressure on the or more the overcapacity in China. That also means that please be careful. If the producer price index is dipping below zero, they will go to any level to dump their products in India, right? And do not think these products are right away from Ganesh idols to agarbatti and things like that. No, you're all laptops, okay? The high quality plastic is coming from China. Don't forget about it. So you never know. Plastic is you use in your toothbrush, okay? There were times you're saying you use and throw. No, the high grade, the standard products which are being shunned out by the European and other markets are coming to your houses. That's something really interesting. And then other implications also, okay, with
Thanks,
regard to other things. Yeah.
Thanks, Arvind. Any further questions? I'm seeing some of the senior scholars also here. So if anybody wants to have a crack at it, can please go ahead. Because if there are no further questions, then we might look towards wrapping it up. If there are no further questions, I think I'll give each of the panelists 1 minute to give their final points, make their final views to each one of them. So I would like to end with that. But before that, final call for questions. Any further comments, questions, or your own views? All right, so I think we'll go back to the order in which we began. So 1 minute to each of the three. Is there a question? Okay, so 1 minute to each of the panelists. So Arvind, we'll go with you the final point. I mean, absolute 1 or 2 sentences in which how are you going to see both the learnings from this and from the 2 sessions, and how do we expect anything big coming out of the third plenum?
The stimulus package is going to come in different forms, as correctly Dr. Devendra said, but it is not in terms of subsidy. To use subsidies called 500 billion renminbi or something like that. It may not come in that form, but there is certainly going to be a huge infusion of state funds because the entire GDP is counted on the expenditures, and how China is going to spend that. But this infusion will come to cater 2 things. One, make sure that everyone is assured, confident that there is, a growing trajectory, a positive trajectory of the growth. Okay, that growth story China has to create. President Xi Jinping has a new job, not to create new idioms, but to create new dream and tell everybody, there is a beautiful China, there is a promising China, and that is going to be one of the important things. Second thing is, the outer or the external headwinds China is facing. China is trying to keep that effect of external headwinds to the zero. It is trying to neutralize that external effect. But the moment China fails to neutralize that external headwind, and that will really imbalance the Chinese, ideas to, infusion or trying to infuse confidence into consumers, is going to be a problem. So consumer confidence, job security, and other behavioral change in the patterns of productive, factors are something which is going to be critical for China in the coming year.
Thanks, Arvind. Devendra, anything big we might expect apart from the stimulus or the discussion largely centering around stimulus, but anything else we might expect from the third
Uh,
plenum?
From third plenum, I think what I mentioned in the discussion that there might be some big bang reform in the fiscal relation between local governments, county level governments, and provincial level governments. And why I'm saying this is more likely because this issue has been mentioned in most of these reports, and it comes out really very important. And given that local governments are struggling for many years, and local debt and hidden debt is a big issue. I think because once the central government has constrained the local governments in borrowing more through these channels, I think it has to put more money through budget. And to do that, it needs to make sure that provincial level governments are allocating resources to the local government. So it is in this area that we might see a big bang reform after 10 years or so, because it was in 2014 that last budget law was amended. And after that we have seen, and most of the some of the economists whose writings I have read, they mention about why there is this challenge for the central government, and this is the way for, and the report is very clear about this reform, that this is very important to resolve these issues.
Thanks. Beam, my final point to ask you is, of course, a lot of these issues are also structural. I mean, even economic issues are requiring, there's talk of deepening reforms, but that might require real structural changes. So now that the party, as we are increasingly seeing, and as also you have pointed out, emerging from both the reports at the two sessions, it looks like the party is now the front and center in any case. It's another example of that. So will the party be amenable to find a middle way in terms to come out of this rut in which the economy is? Will it be amenable to finding a middle way approach than have a complete consolidation over the economic matters? Do you foresee anything of that from the plenum?
I think as per my readings of what we see, the literature that we see around, even the party reports and the reports that we see from coming from China, with regard to, if you really look at if the party will take a middle way approach, I think party has no choice, but definitely it has to and therefore I would see more anti-corruption campaign getting launched at these different sectors, because with coming of big bang reforms, as Devendra said, with stimulus packages also comes the party and the investigation, and also with regard to visits and all. So I see more party getting control in right front center, and since the party has taken the task of economics today in China. So I think the government agencies like the state council and its other subordinate agencies have no role much to play. But in fact, it is the party. But if you have to see, so launching up to third plenum and see, it was more of economics, but also definitely political headwinds also, with a lot of leadership personnel getting reshuffled at different places. And I think if we look clearly at the provincial level and some of the news coming from different provinces, we could see reshuffling happening every now and then. So I think the party has no choice, but in fact, at least to rein in more political control. That's my response. Thank you.
Thanks, Beam. Thanks, in fact, to all three of you, Arvind, Devendra, and Beam, for this being part of this exercise. This was really wonderful. It was really fulfilling in the sense of what was there in the two sessions, and then how we are actually looking at towards the third plenum. So this was really, I think, a very fruitful and fulfilling afternoon. Back to you, Anushka.
Dr. Krishnan, now I seek your permission to formally end the session.
Yes, please.
So with this, we come to the end of today's seminar. We thank Dr. Bhim Subha, Dr. Devendra Kumar, Dr. Arvind Yelleri, and Dr. Anand P. Krishnan for gracing today's seminar with their presence and for giving us their precious time. We also offer our gratitude to the audience. The video of today's discussion shall be available on the ICS YouTube channel. The ICS conducts seminar every Wednesday. We extend our warm invitation to all for the upcoming Wednesday seminar scheduled for 5th June 2024. The title of the seminar is The Rise of For-Profit Medical Care in China, the case study of United Family Healthcare. You may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you for joining us today, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.